Dallas, Texas. We have the military on our minds on Outnumbered Overtime. Thank you for active duty and past veterans for service. I'm Harris. Here's the daily briefing.
We begin with a Fox News alert. Congress returning to work this hour in lame duck session. The stage now set for high drama over legislation and leadership. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Julie Banderas in for Dana Perino today, and this is the Daily Briefing. So it's a whole new dynamic on Capitol Hill as lawmakers try to pass several items on their to-do list, but battles are also brewing in both parties. Nancy Pelosi making her bid to become Speaker of the House once again as Republicans look for a leader to replace Paul Ryan. Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel picks it up from there. He's live from Capitol Hill. So, Mike, what are expectations in terms of the upcoming leadership battles?
Well, Julie, good afternoon. On the Republican side, the big question is the race to replace Paul Ryan. You have Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy facing Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan. The winner will be the House Republican leader in the new Congress. On the Democrat side, Nancy Pelosi is trying to win the support of her members, even though dozens campaigned against her being the next speaker. Some leading Republicans are looking ahead to that battle.
They've got an internal fight. Look, there were a number of Nancy Pelosi's Democrat candidates who ran saying they wouldn't vote for her as Speaker. So that's going to be an interesting test that a lot of people will be watching in January. Will their very first vote as a new member of Congress be to break the word they made to their constituents? That's going to be something they have to deal with.
Then there's some must-pass items that lawmakers must consider, including funding part of the government, what to do about the border wall before lawmakers can head for the exits. Julie?
What about the start of new faces trying to find their way around Capitol Hill?
Yeah, we've seen a number of Republicans and Democrats just elected last week to Congress trying to figure out things here on Capitol Hill. We saw Vice President Mike Pence's brother, Greg Pence, who was elected to Congress representing Indiana, and a former Clinton administration cabinet secretary says she's looking forward to getting to work here in Congress.
I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun during the campaign. My campaign manager told me not to say that. But the truth is that I like policy making, I like politics, and I love my district. I love Miami.
And newly elected Senator-elect Mitt Romney of the great state of Utah told us this is orientation day, and he's getting oriented. Julie?
It feels like, freshman year. Is there any hazing going on? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
We'll see.
This is why I stayed out of a sorority. All right, more on this now with Chris Stirewalt, Fox News politics editor and editor of Halftime Report. Were you in a fraternity by any chance?
Oh, no. They could have done better. Being me and how big of a nerd I was in college, I cannot even fathom what it would have been like.
Your hazing would have been fierce. Okay. Woof. All right. Well, let's talk about all these freshmen heading into Washington. First of all, before they get there and actually have control, Congress does have 2 months to get their act together. They're in the final stretch in its lame duck session. Does the Republican majority have any chance of passing the president's top priority legislation on immigration before Democrats take control?
It depends on what the president defines as his priority on immigration. There are things on immigration that might be able to pass during the lame duck, probably nothing huge, but certainly there are things that they could take up. And remember, for a lot of these members, Republicans have 41 open seats. They had 41 people who are not coming back anyway. They're going to end up with another handful that got beat. And so they have a lot of people that aren't worried about the verdict of the voters on what's next. So they have some running room here. And the same is true when you have senators on the other side who are not returning, that they may feel a little latitude to not do what they would have done before, or to do what they might not have done before the election. So the realm of what's possible opens up a little bit.
So then they've got final 2 months in power. Republicans are obviously going to try to deliver on Trump's promise to fund the border wall. It doesn't seem 60 days is going to be enough if it hasn't happened in the last 2 years. But it could spark a federal government shutdown in weeks. Let's just talk about the money that it would cost. Republicans have already approved $5 billion for the president's wall. In the Senate, where Republicans need Democratic support to prevent a filibuster, a bipartisan bill allocates $1.6 billion. That's all said and good, but, can Democrats have their fingerprints on any deal that would result in a border wall?
Look, it just depends on what the president defines as enough money. He's the one, it's his idea. He's the one who gets to define what's enough money. He can sort of declare victory whenever he wants. Does he need another $20 billion? Does he need this? How much more does he want before he says that he's won? And in his case, of course, saying that he's won isn't necessarily a good thing because it's politically useful to say that you still have the issue. So I don't see him declaring victory and bringing this to a conclusion. But at the same time, there is a component of his base that without additional border wall funding, without additional border security funding, they're going to complain and say that he rolled over, because certainly things aren't going to get better in the new year. The chances of doing a deal on immigration, I actually think, aren't none in the new Congress, simply because Trump is in a position that he could do that. But this is the chance to hit a good knock on this before they leave town.
Yeah, another question. You know, the Democrats are in the midst of a battle over their House Speaker, and I'm curious if Democratic leadership can cut any deal with the president in the midst of all of this.
Well, we're going to find out. The Republicans are going to have their leadership election tomorrow. That is bound to be contentious. Nancy Pelosi gave herself a little more cushion on the backside. She's got a little more time. She can wait until after Thanksgiving before they have their leadership election. So she'll have plenty of time to whip votes. We'll know very clearly by the time we get to the 28th of November how weakened of a position she really is in. Right now, she looks like she's going to be very tough to beat, simply because there isn't a Democrat who stepped forward that can unite the dissidents. There are plenty of Democrats who would not like to vote for her. There are plenty of Democrats who would rather vote for somebody else if they were given the chance. But so far, there isn't anybody who stepped forward that can unite the dissidents and beat her. So that puts her in a pretty strong position.
All right, I want to move on to House Democrats hoping to get something done come January. And the majority of the Democrats here oppose the whole impeachment idea of our president. Of the 52 freshman Democrats who won election last week, 11 want to immediately move to impeach President Trump. 13 oppose impeachment. 17 want to see Mueller's report before deciding on impeachment. So, Chris, I mean, with only 21% of new House Democrats ready to impeach Trump, how big of a fallout would it be for the Democratic Party if they ultimately did decide to move forward with impeachment proceedings?
Man, who are these 17 people who say they want to read the evidence before making a decision? Don't they know this is 2018? You should just have a hot take and get it out there. Definitely don't consider the facts at hand. Look, for Democrats, it matters enormously what Mueller finds. It matters enormously what else is found in their investigations about Donald Trump, his business practices, ethics, da-da-da-da-da. We don't know what else is out there. And, of course, the big story of the last 2 years has been the Republicans have done a great deal, not only to protect Trump, but also to run interference for him. They have done a great job in harrying the FBI and the Justice Department. That won't be there anymore either. The Justice Department will be able to go on its own hook to a much larger degree without dealing with the Republicans in the House. So who knows what's going to come out? I would say this. For Democrats, if they bring up the issue of impeachment prematurely, they will pay a terrible price for it, because that's not what people were voting for. People were voting for, I think, in large part, in these 35 or 40 districts that the Democrats flipped, I think people were in large check on Trump, but not necessarily a crusade against Trump.
Yeah, no, Democrats need to look at history, because look at how the impeachment proceedings for Bill Clinton blew up in their faces for the Republicans. And so the focus now is the next 2 or 6 years. What's the focus? James Hohmann writes in his daily 202 column titled "Liberals Look for Leverage in House Leadership Elections," and I'm reading in part, it says, "The sheer size of the Progressive Caucus will make it harder for them to stick together than it has been for the Freedom Caucus. But Republicans have also learned over the past 2 years that it's much easier to stay united when there is a president of the opposite party." He also says that dislike for Trump will be the biggest driving factor behind party unity for the next 2, maybe 6 years. Democrats feel that their anti-Trump campaign perhaps won them the House. The question is, could it win them the White House, or could it backfire if they continue on this path?
It depends on how aggressive the liberal base of the Democratic Party is. You know, one of the things that happened to Republicans after 2010 when they routed Obama, they took a lot of things for granted, and they did not understand how difficult it was going to be to defeat an incumbent president. Only twice well, 3 times in the past century has a sitting president who is one term seeking re-election been defeated. It's hard to do, even if the president is unpopular. And if Democrats are realistic about their situation, then they might be able to do some good. If they get to pie in the sky and they start thinking this is going to be easy and over-interpreting the results of this election, as the Republicans did 8 years ago, then it's going to be very difficult for them to make the gains they need.
All right. Chris Stirewalt, great to see you as always. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Recounts are underway in Florida with a Thursday deadline for the results. Election officials furiously counting ballots in the hotly contested Senate and governor's races as both sides file lawsuits. Griff Jenkins is watching it all in Florida. Hey, Griff.
Hey, Julie, that's right. 65 of Florida's 67 counties are well on their way to a recount, although in 2, Palm Beach County and here in Broward, it's taking a little longer. Let me take you in the tabulation room now and show you what we're looking at. Now, 199,000 of roughly 715,000 ballots have been recounted. They sort of separated them into early voting, day of voting, and mail-ins. That's going to continue this afternoon, probably wrap up tonight, and we'll see where they are when that deadline fast approaches, which is 3 p.m. on Thursday, to get a final tally in. What you're seeing though on top of the machines, real important here, is the undervote and overvote. That means they either marked too little or too much on the governor, Senate, or agriculture commissioner ballots, and they're being separated because after the recount, if that percentage is less than 0.2%, a quarter percent of the margin between the two candidates, it goes to a manual hand recount, and we're learning that they may be preparing in anticipation of that likely to happen. More on that in a moment. But first, the election commissioner here, Dr. Brenda Snipes, kind of coming under a lot of fire, accused in Governor Scott's lawsuits of failing to comply with election law, and former Governor Jeb Bush tweeting today that he thinks she should be removed from office. I asked Dr. Snipes about Jeb Bush's tweet. Here's what she had to say.
Yes, I did hear about the tweet. I don't tweet, so I didn't read it, but I did receive the information from several people, and many of them were concerned that that statement was made. However, it's an opinion. You know, he feels that I should be removed.
Now, on that hand recount, if after Thursday the recount is under that 2.25% and we get to a hand recount, it's going to be remembrances really of 2000 in Bush v. Gore, because you're going to have more than 100 tables set up with multiple representatives from Democrat, Republican, and county staff at each table. Julie?
All right. I'm going to be talking a lot more about this coming up, about whether these recounts really change the outcome. History says no. Griff Jenkins, thank you very much. The trial of one of the world's most notorious drug lords happening here in New York City, but there's a delay. We'll tell you why. But first, California wildfires claiming more lives and homes. What are you seeing where you are, Jonathan?
Yesterday, I signed a disaster declaration for the state of California. We will do everything in our power to support and protect our fellow citizens in harm's way. And we say, I think as a group, I can tell you as a group, God bless everybody.
President Trump there addressing the California wildfires just moments ago at the White House as crews continue to battle major fires in the northern and southern parts of the state. Outside Los Angeles, the Santa Ana winds are making it here in New York City. Security, of course, tight. This guy has escaped from prison a few times at federal court in Brooklyn for the trial of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. El Chapo is charged with drug trafficking and money laundering while overseeing the Sinaloa cartel. Brian Yennis is live outside our U.S. District Court here in Brooklyn, in New York City. Hi, Brian.
Hi, Julie. Well, the trial is underway, but opening statements have been delayed. The New York Post is reporting that juror number 1 showed up this morning with a doctor's note saying that she was too anxious and too upset to take part in the trial. The Post is reporting that this is the same juror, the same woman who sobbed last week after she was chosen for jury duty. She said that she feared for her life, and according to Joaquin Guzman's history, she may have a reason to be. He is known for somebody to have hired sicarios, or hitmen, to kill potential witnesses and anyone who cooperates in trials against him. Now, in terms of the judge also agreed that this was a potential issue. He told the jurors that they should remain anonymous and be partially sequestered. El Chapo faces 17 federal charges. We can expect prosecutors to tell an intricate story about how El Chapo amassed $14 billion in personal wealth. As the world's top drug kingpin, he was the first to use underground tunnels to bring drugs into the U.S.
What made him so significant within the trafficking world was his mastery of logistics. He was the master at bringing drugs from South America into the United States and from little villages in Mexico into the United States and Chicago and major cities in the north.
Prosecutors say El Chapo ordered the murder of thousands, becoming the top supplier of cocaine, heroin, meth, and marijuana in the United States. The evidence includes over 300,000 documents, thousands of wiretap audio recordings, 200 metric tons of seized drugs, and testimonies from dozens of witnesses. Witnesses including Jesus Vicente Zambada. The 43-year-old oversaw cartel logistics. He signed a plea deal, and if he cooperates, his sentence could be reduced from life in prison to as little as 10 years. Now, El Chapo famously escaped twice from 2 maximum security prisons in Mexico in 2001 inside of a laundry cart, and again in 2015 when a drug tunnel was dug into his jail cell. He was extradited in January of 2017, and he has been in solitary confinement in a jail cell here in Manhattan for the last 21 months. Security has been extraordinarily tight. For the next 4 months, we can expect an armored caravan to bring in from his cell in Manhattan to court here in Brooklyn twice a week. And again, his defense says that he is being framed in all of this, by the way. Julie?
Right. Okay. Brian Yanis, thank you. Gaza militants firing rockets into Israel. At least one person was killed in the most serious escalation of violence since the Israel-Hamas war in 2014. Benjamin Hall reporting from the Israel-Gaza border with the very latest. Hi, Benjamin.
Yeah, hi, Julian. Just in the last few hours, Palestinian factions have...
And both parties are facing, well, a leadership battle, if you will. Dr. Jeannie Zaino is a political science professor at Iona College. Stephen Sigmund is Senior Vice President of Global Strategy Group and a Democratic strategist. Thank you both for coming on. I first want to ask you what you make of Nancy Pelosi pulling the gender card.
Well, you know, in a year in which Nancy Pelosi, we're going to see at least 102, if not 103, maybe more women coming to the House. You know, I am not a big fan of pulling the gender card because I think Nancy Pelosi is probably the best choice for the Democrats at this point. So I don't think she needs to do that. But I think in this year, it's what everybody is talking about, women taking over the House. And so I think the woman who raised so much money to get Democrats there, of course, replacing her with a man is something that I think is, you know, sort of foreboding at this point.
Let me ask a man. You know, if I'm up for a job, I don't want to be looked at for my gender. I want to be looked at for my experience.
I don't think you have to look at her for her gender. I mean, Nancy Pelosi is going to be the speaker. And she said that this is transitional, but she's going to be the speaker.
But if she's so sure of it, then why is she pulling out the punches before she enters the ring?
Because there'll be some Sturm und Drang and there'll be some votes against her. But here's the bottom line. She doesn't need to pull any kind of card. She just orchestrated and engineered one of the biggest takeovers of Congress in history since Watergate. She raised more money than anybody's raised really in history. And, you know, this is a person who's been attacked, vilified, claimed to be pulling the gender card her entire life. And she's still standing, and most of those people who attacked and vilified her are not.
Okay, let's let the viewers decide whether she is or is not pulling the gender card. There was an interview on Sunday with CBS Face the Nation, and Nancy Pelosi spoke about the male-dominated congressional structure. She says Hillary Clinton's defeat in 2016 was a primary reason she sought to extend her time in the White House. And I want you to hear this, and then we'll come back and discuss.
We cannot have the 4 leaders of Congress, the President of the United States, these 5 people, and not have the voice of women, especially since women were the majority of the voters, the workers in campaigns, and now part of this glorious victory. When I came to Congress, there were 12 Democratic women. I said, we have to change this. Now we'll have close to 90.
Okay, so when Nancy Pelosi came to Washington, Democrats had only 12 women in the chamber. Now they have about 90. So she says if Hillary had won, she'd go home. They have 90 women, so it's not like there's a shortage of women, but she still believes that it is a male-dominated job.
Look, I think this is important to her. I mean, she wasn't pulling the gender card there. She was telling you reality. And this is a person who has been in Congress for a long time, who has fought through a male-dominated structure for decades and decades. And I think it's important to her to be one of the leaders of one of the 4 leaders for this period of time.
Right. And let me just say, you know, not to say I don't believe all politicians, but I'm not sure I believe Nancy Pelosi was ready to leave had Hillary Clinton come either. I think it's convenient to say that now. I do believe Nancy Pelosi does need to build up a leadership bench. Right. The Democratic Party the leadership is older. They need a new generation. So I think she should take 6 months a year, do that, and then move forward. That's what I would recommend.
That's fair. I mean, she said she's going to be a transitional leader, and she needs to start proving that.
Okay. All right. I want to switch gears now to gun control, something the Democrats have vowed they are going to take up when they take over in January. The deadly mass shooting, obviously, in California, sparking a major debate. There were many Democrats that said, in fact, if they were to win Republican-held seats, that they would make this a top issue. Then a day after dozens of Democrats who campaigned on promises to strengthen gun laws, they were elected to the House of Representatives. And I want to bring up one example. Kim Schreier, Washington's 8th District. She's one of the many of Democrats who backed stronger gun regulations. She flipped Republican-controlled seats in last week's midterm elections. The issue obviously is going to be high on the list here, but the question is, are Republicans going to meet Democrats somewhere in the middle when it comes to gun control? Because Republicans maintain one thing: it's not gun control, it's mental health, and that is an issue that needs to be addressed as well. I'll let you go.
I think they both should be and can be addressed, and hopefully that is what happens. But I think, you know, we don't know yet what's going to happen, because I'm not so certain Democrats have enough votes to move forward. They made great advances this year on this issue, but they may not have the numbers yet to move forward this year on gun control in the way they want. But they certainly could compromise with Republicans, because I think most Democrats agree that mental health is a huge challenge.
In this case, mental health was the #1 problem. This person was red flagged. Police had visited their home several times. He shot up his mother's home with whom he lived.
Can't have access to guns. I mean, there's an obvious need here that the American people are calling for, and both sides ought to take action on it.
Stephen Sigmund, thank you very much. And Dr. Jeannie Zainal, great to see you both. Thank you so much. All right, so Democrat Kyrsten Sinema winning Arizona's Senate race, flipping the red seat blue. Republican Martha McSally conceded last night as Sinema opened up a modest margin of victory. Alicia Cunha is live in Phoenix with a wrap-up. Hey, Alicia.
Hi, Julie. Senator-elect Democrat Kyrsten Sinema is on Capitol Hill today for orientation. The Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer tweeting a picture with her, writing, "Women of the West." 2 new great women Democratic senators from the western part of the United States, Kyrsten Sinema from Arizona and Jackie Rosen from Nevada. So proud we'll be working with them in January. Last night in Scottsdale, the 3-term Congresswoman who formulated herself as a moderate and advocate for all, especially when it comes to access to health care, thanked her supporters.
Arizona rejected what has become far too common in our country: name-calling, petty personal attacks, and doing and saying whatever it takes just to get elected. It's dangerous, and it lessens who we are as a country.
Once the Associated Press projected Sinema the winner, Republican Congresswoman Martha McSally took to Twitter for her concession.
I wish her all success as she represents Arizona in the Senate. And I also want to say thank you to everybody who supported me in this campaign, my staff and volunteers and everybody who voted for me. I'm so grateful for you as my wingman and my wingwomen in this journey. We sure wish it came out with a different result, but I'm so thankful for you.
But guess what? U.S. Senate intrigue is far from over in the Grand Canyon state. You'll remember that at the passing of Senator John McCain, Republican Governor Doug Ducey named retired Senator Jon Kyl to fill the seat. At the time, Kyl said he would only do so until the end of the session. We're talking about December, January. So, Julie, there's been chatter about McSally actually filling that seat. Just chatter. Ducey's not answering phone calls. Neither is McSally on this one. So we'll keep you updated. Julie?
All right, Alicia Cunha, thank you very much. We will be right back.
Officials today announcing they've arrested members of another family in connection with the 8 murders. We'll have the details and the rest of the day's news top of the hour on Shepard Smith reporting.
Maryland's Attorney General going to court to try to block Matthew Whitaker's appointment as acting Attorney General. The state seeking to install Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein in the role. I'm joined now by Michael Moore, former U.S. Attorney for the Middle District of Georgia. Thank you very much for talking to us. What do you make of President Trump's pick for acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker getting challenged by the state of Maryland? And then I have to ask you, what business is it of Maryland Attorney General Brian Frosh to have a say in the U.S. Attorney General?
I think there's generally the idea that the president can pick who he or she chooses to lead a department. The problem here is that there's a fairly good amount of law that says that someone who is a principal officer in the government should, in fact, be Senate confirmed, and we don't have that here. And so I think the president's pick is pretty transparent in that he was trying to, at least from all appearances, stack the deck as we're getting into the end of the Mueller investigation, or certainly at a critical time in the investigation. Maryland's decision is, deals with various efforts they've had to enforce parts of the health care law and some decisions that Jeff Sessions had made, and now he's transitioning out, and there'll need to be some interpretation about the department's move. So they've got an interest to bring the case forward and to bring the issue forward in that litigation. I think it's interesting, of course, that Rod Rosenstein is up that way, and it's unusual. I mean, typically the law and the process is to move the deputy into that slot. Yeah. That's right. And there's a reason for Senate confirmation. That is to make sure that somebody has the judgment and the temperament and the experience and the knowledge and sort of those qualifications that we consider basic. I mean, and I think we're at a point where if Whitaker is not even talking now about the need to recuse himself from the investigation, then I question whether or not he has that judgment anyway.
Okay, so the Maryland court believes Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein should be next in line. Democrats have sharply criticized Whitaker over numerous past statements questioning Mueller's investigation, as you touched on just now, including suggestions a possible Sessions replacement could slash the special counsel's budget so low that any further efforts would cease. So then with all of that said, does Whitaker need to recuse himself?
I don't think there's no question that he ought to do that. The department has a long history. The Department of Justice has a long history of making sure that it remains in neutral ground. It's not an arm of the president. It's not there to do the president's bidding, to prosecute political enemies and that type of thing. And so just by making those statements, by having those contacts, by having relationships in matters that are at least sort of tangential to the investigation, he clouds that appearance of impartiality. And the public needs to be able to have confidence in whatever happens in the investigation, just like we want them to have confidence in the outcome of an election. We want them to have confidence in the outcome of the investigation, and he's clouded that. And so there's no question in my mind. I think a first-year law student would know they should recuse themselves.
Yeah, well, and many would have said that Jeff Sessions had no choice but to recuse himself as well. We also know how the president felt about that. I mean, recusal is a sensitive spot for the president because he never forgave Jeff Sessions after he recused himself. So I'm just curious how Whitaker recusing himself would sit with the president.
Well, I think it's important to remember that the Attorney General is not the president's lawyer. And that's an idea that this president has been unable to accept. And he or she is not there to do this president's bidding. And they are there for the entire country. And so the fact that the president may want to have his or her mouthpiece in the department is really irrelevant to the role of the Attorney General. Certainly there are policies, there are things, initiatives that may be put forth by the administration, but they are not there simply to protect the president. And so he was upset about Sessions doing it. We'll see now if Whitaker has the backbone to recuse himself, and he should go ahead and do it now, not wait for a court determination.
All right. Michael Moore, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. Thank you.
It's glad to be with you. Thank you.
So Amazon is making a big announcement, splitting its pick for a second quarter headquarters, how the online retailer will impact the cities chosen. There are two of them.
Fox Nation founder.
Get new live opinion.
Amazon's long search for a second headquarters ends in a split decision. The two big winners, Long Island City and Queens, New York. Are they winners, though? And Arlington, Virginia, outside Washington, D.C. Both locations will eventually have 25,000 Amazon employees. Brett Larson joins me now. Brett, how is this going to impact Amazon's going to impact these areas?
Probably in a mixed bag of good and bad. Good because they'll bring a lot of well-paying jobs. Bad because, specifically to Long Island City, people who live in New York may be familiar with it. It's already a little crowded. Folks know that our subway system here in New York City is the worst in the world. And so now you're going to add 25,000 more passengers to that. And we gave them a big tax incentive. Both the cities did. Both the Crystal City, Virginia and Long Island City gave big tax breaks to the, you can see it here, for these high-paying jobs. But they gave up some tax base. I guess you're going to make some of that money back in the taxes that the employees will pay in their paychecks, as well as getting out and about. But this is going to be a curious thing. There's a great article that I read earlier that talked about sort of the tech culture in San Francisco and how that really resulted in a lot of protests, because a lot of the tech workers, they live in their homes, they get on the shuttle bus, they go to their tech job, they stay there all day, they come home, they go to bed. They're not enjoying the vibrant nightlife that the city has to offer. So we'll see how that kind of pans out in time.
You know, having been a driver who has tried to drive into Long Island during, you know, not even rush hour.
Anything. Just any time of the day. 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon.
I can't imagine adding this many more people to places like, first of all, the Beltway of D.C., major traffic nightmare.
Massive
Long Island, 495, major nightmare. I'm not going to lie, four-letter bombs have come out of my mouth after sitting in traffic there. What is going to happen when this takes place, and how do the locals feel about it in these towns?
We have already seen on Facebook protests are planned. I'm not sure what they think they're going to protest against, because the deal is done. But there are protests planned for people who are in Long Island City saying, we don't want this. It's a double-edged sword, because you've got the good-paying jobs come in, but you've also got the crowd coming into an already crowded area. JetBlue also has their headquarters out in Long Island City.
Oh, brother.
They're based out of JFK. So this interesting times.
Time to get a helicopter.
Everybody gets Amazon Prime
for free. Everybody gets a helicopter.
Just kidding.
Okay. All right, Bret Baier, great to see you.
Good to see you.
Bret Baier, what the heck? Bret Larson. Why did I just call you Bret Baier? And he's a very good friend of mine. I got Bret Baier on the brain. Residents of a New York town got a big surprise Sunday when they found an elephant strolling down the road. Fritha broke out of her pen at an animal sanctuary in Orange County, about 70 miles north of New York City. The Asian elephant has been at the farm since she was found orphaned and suffering from napalm burns during the Vietnam War. And the good news is police were able to block the road, and Fritha is safe. Thanks for joining us. I'm Julie Banderas. Here's Shep.